The airport's fluorescent lights were harsh, almost cruel, as Clara Bennett shuffled toward her boarding gate with her infant son, Eli, in her arms. The child was fussy, his little fists batting at her chin, his soft whimpers rising above the chatter of the crowd. Clara rocked him gently, whispering soothing nonsense, though her own chest ached with exhaustion. Her cardigan smelled faintly of baby powder and stress. She had bought the ticket only 3 days ago, after her sister insisted she leave her crumbling life behind and come live with her across the country. The decision had been desperate, born from eviction notices piling on her doorstep and the crushing reality that she could no longer provide stability for Eli on her own. She reached the gate just as the attendant called for her boarding group. Slinging the diaper bag over her shoulder, she moved with the practiced shuffle of a mother, balancing baby, bag, and fragile composure in equal measure. On the plane, Clara found her seat, 14B. Middle row. She sighed in relief that at least the window seat was empty. But her heart sank when she noticed the man in the aisle seat. He was sharply dressed in a tailored black suit, his jawline cut with precision, his posture commanding even in the cramped airline chair. His watch gleamed under the dim cabin lights, and the faint scent of expensive cologne reached her before she even sat down. He looked like someone who had never once struggled to pay a bill or lost sleep over a crying baby. "Excuse me," Clara whispered, inching past him to her seat. He barely glanced up from his phone, shifting just enough for her to slide in. Clara pressed herself against the window, praying Eli wouldn't cry too loudly and inconvenience the stranger beside her. The last thing she needed was another judgmental stare. The plane took off, its engines roaring as the city lights shrank beneath them. Eli stirred, his small body restless. Clara cradled him closer, whispering a lullaby she barely had the strength to finish. Her eyes burned from days without proper rest. She told herself she'd stay awake, but her body betrayed her. Slowly, as Eli's breathing evened out, her own head began to nod. Before she knew it, her cheek had landed softly against something solid, the suited man's shoulder. She startled, ready to jerk away, but the stranger didn't move. Instead, he shifted slightly, making her position more comfortable. His arm remained at his side, composed, but steady, like he'd silently decided not to disturb her. For the first time in months, Clara surrendered to sleep. A crackle over the intercom roused her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin our descent." Clara blinked, disoriented. Her head rested on something warm, and her son's tiny hand was curled around silk. She gasped. Eli's drool glistened against the man's tie, a tie that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. "Oh God," Clara whispered, straightening abruptly. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." The man turned, meeting her wide eyes with startling calm. His gaze was sharp, steel blue, yet not unkind. "Don't apologize," he said. His voice was deep, steady. "You were exhausted." Clara's cheeks flushed crimson. She fussed with Eli's blanket, avoiding the man's eyes. "I shouldn't have. I must have been a nuisance." He smirked faintly, glancing at his tie where Eli's drool had dried. "It's just a tie. I own others." The casual way he said it made Clara falter. Most people would have been annoyed, if not outright furious. Instead, he seemed unbothered. Passengers around them began adjusting their seats, fastening belts, murmuring in anticipation of landing. Clara hugged Eli closer, desperate to vanish into anonymity. But the man's voice cut through her thoughts. "You're traveling alone." Clara hesitated. His tone wasn't nosy, just curious. Still, she felt exposed. "Yes," she answered softly. "Where are you going?" "To stay with my sister. Just trying to get back on my feet." She bit her lip, hating how small the admission sounded. The man studied her, his expression unreadable. She braced for judgment, but instead he said, "You're stronger than you think. Most wouldn't even attempt what you're doing." Clara blinked, stunned. No one called her strong. Friends had called her naive, her ex had called her useless, and her mother-in-law had called her a mistake. But never strong. She opened her mouth to respond, but the plane jolted as it touched down. Wheels screeched against the runway, and the cabin filled with the rustle of passengers preparing to disembark. Clara kept her head down, focused on Eli. She couldn't shake the feeling she'd embarrassed herself terribly. When the seatbelt light blinked off, passengers surged into the aisle. Clara waited, holding Eli close, fumbling with her bag. She felt slow, clumsy compared to the brisk efficiency around her. A shadow loomed at her side. The suited man had stood, retrieving his sleek carry-on with practiced ease. Yet instead of leaving, he extended a hand toward her bag. "I'll take that," he said. Clara blinked. "Oh, no, I can manage. You've got your hands full." His tone left no room for debate. Reluctantly, she handed him the diaper bag. He slung it effortlessly over his arm. She gathered Eli, feeling oddly small beside him. As they exited the plane, Clara glanced at him once more. The name Wolf Enterprises flashed in her memory. She had glimpsed the logo on his phone screen earlier. And suddenly, realization hit. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just some businessman. This was Alexander Wolf, billionaire CEO, notorious in business magazines, the kind of man who made headlines for acquisitions and ruthless negotiations. She had fallen asleep on the shoulder of one of the most powerful men in the country. Panic surged through her. She wanted to vanish before he realized she knew who he was. Before she became just another charity case in his eyes. But as they reached the terminal doors, he turned to her, his expression calm yet oddly deliberate. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said. "Someone who didn't quit, even when she should have." Clara swallowed hard, unsure what to say. He handed her the diaper bag. For a moment, their fingers brushed, and she felt the weight of his gaze. "I don't usually say this," he continued, his voice low, "but I think we'll meet again." And then, before she could respond, he walked away. His stride was confident, his presence commanding, until the crowd swallowed him whole. Clara stood frozen, Eli stirring against her chest, her heart thundering. She didn't understand why he had said that, or why it felt less like a casual remark and more like a promise. As she finally turned toward baggage claim, her thoughts spun. She was just a struggling single mother with nothing but debts and dreams. He was a billionaire who lived in a world of glass towers and private jets. And yet, for one night, their worlds had collided, in the quiet hum of a night flight, where a poor girl had dared to rest on the shoulder of a man who had everything. She didn't know if she would ever see him again. But she knew one thing with startling certainty. If she did, nothing in her life would ever be the same. The airport terminal buzzed with the restless energy of late-night travelers, but Clara Bennett felt like a ghost moving among them. Her cardigan was thin, her shoes scuffed, and her arms ached from holding her infant son, Eli, who whimpered softly against her chest. She rocked him gently while inching forward in the boarding line, muttering, "Almost there, sweetheart. Just a little longer." Life hadn't been kind lately. A failed marriage, overdue bills, and the looming threat of eviction had drained her of hope. It was only her sister's insistence, and generosity, that had given her this ticket. Clara was flying across the country to start over, though she carried more fear than optimism. When she reached her row on the plane, Clara sighed. Seat 14B, the dreaded middle. The window seat was blessedly empty, but the aisle was already occupied. The man beside her didn't look like he belonged on a crowded economy flight. His suit was sharply tailored, his cufflinks gleamed, and his sleek watch caught the faint cabin light. He was scrolling through his phone with the calm assurance of someone accustomed to control. "Excuse me," Clara whispered, squeezing past with her baby and diaper bag. He shifted just enough for her to slide in, his expression unreadable. She braced herself for the eye rolls or muttered complaints she had grown used to receiving when Eli fussed. But the man remained silent, eyes fixed on his screen. As the plane taxied, Eli squirmed. Clara murmured lullabies, rocking him until his cries softened into tiny sighs. She hadn't had more than 3 hours of sleep in a row since his birth. Fatigue pressed against her temples like iron weights. "Stay awake," she told herself. "Don't disturb anyone." But exhaustion is a thief, and it took her quickly. Her head drifted sideways, landing softly against something warm. She startled, but the man beside her didn't flinch. Instead, he adjusted slightly, almost imperceptibly, to make her more comfortable. And for the first time in months, Clara allowed herself to surrender. With Eli nestled against her chest and her cheek resting on a stranger's shoulder, she slept. Part 2. The Morning Shock. A voice crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our descent shortly." Clara stirred. Awareness rushed back, and with it, horror. She realized she was still leaning against the suited man. Worse, Eli's tiny hand clutched the edge of his silk tie, a small trail of drool marking his expensive fabric. "Oh no," Clara whispered, jerking upright. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." The man turned, his steel blue eyes calm and startlingly direct. "Don't apologize. You were exhausted. His tone wasn't dismissive, it was matter of fact, almost gentle. Clara blinked, flustered. She fumbled with Eli's blanket, desperate to undo the awkwardness. I must have made you uncomfortable, she murmured. He glanced at his tie, the corner of his mouth twitching in the faintest smirk. It's just a tie. I have others. Clara didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who was this man who could brush off an intrusion so easily? She'd half expected him to summon the flight attendant in outrage. As the plane descended, he finally put away his phone. For a split second, she glimpsed the logo on his screen, Wolf Enterprises. Recognition jolted her. She'd read about them even in her modest world, a corporate giant, run by one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. Her breath caught. The suited man wasn't just wealthy, he was that wolf. Her pulse raced. She'd slept on the shoulder of a billionaire whose decisions could topple industries. Clara wanted to melt into her seat. The seatbelt light blinked on. Passengers shifted, bracing for landing. Clara hugged Eli tightly, pretending not to notice the weight of the man's gaze. You're traveling alone? He asked suddenly. Yes, she admitted, her voice small. Where to? My sister's. I need a fresh start. The words tasted fragile, exposing her reality more than she intended. He studied her. His gaze wasn't pitying, but measured, like he was weighing something about her. Finally, he said quietly, You're stronger than you think. Most people wouldn't even try. The words stunned her. For so long, she'd been labeled foolish, unlucky, weak. But never strong. The wheels screeched against the runway, jolting her from the moment. Passengers rushed to stand, overhead bins clattering. Clara lingered, fumbling with her bag while holding Eli close. Then, unexpectedly, the man stood and retrieved her diaper bag with ease. I'll take this, he said, his tone brooking no argument. Clara blinked, startled. I can manage. You've got your hands full. She accepted his help reluctantly, following him down the aisle. The terminal buzzed with chaos as travelers dispersed. Clara was ready to vanish into the crowd, embarrassed by the strange intimacy of the night. But just as she turned toward baggage claim, a hand brushed her elbow. She froze. The CEO stood there, suitcase in hand, his expression calm but purposeful. You remind me of someone I once knew, he said. Someone who refused to quit. Clara's heart pounded. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. He handed her the diaper bag, his gaze lingering. I don't usually say this, he continued, but I think we'll meet again. And then he was gone, his confident stride carrying him into the sea of travelers until he disappeared entirely. Clara stood motionless, Eli stirring against her chest, her pulse racing. She couldn't fathom why he'd said that, or why it felt less like a polite remark and more like a promise. As she finally walked toward her new beginning, one thought clung stubbornly to her. For one night, a poor girl had found refuge on the shoulder of a man who had everything. And if fate brought them together again, nothing in her life would ever be the same.